If you're a pop culture junkie who loves TV, film, music, comedy, and other really important stuff, then you've come to the right place. Get ready and settle in for Classic Conversations, the best pop culture interviews in the world. That's right, we circled the globe so you don't have to. If you're ready to be the king of the water cooler, then you're ready for Classic Conversations with your host, Jeff Dwoskin.
All right, Estelle, thank you so much for that amazing introduction. You get the show going each and every week, and this week was no exception. Welcome, everybody, to episode 308 of Classic Conversations. As always, I am your host, Jeff Dwoskin. Welcome to what's sure to be one of the classicest episodes of all time. We're diving deep with my guest, Stan Zimmerman, author of The Girls from Golden to Gilmore, stories about all the wonderful women I've worked with. And that's coming up in just a few seconds. And in these few seconds, episode 307, George Schlatter was here, creator of Laugh-In. Talk about an episode full of stories. Do not miss that episode with George. But right now, we've got tons of stories waiting for you from the Gilmore Girls, from the Golden Girls, Roseanne, Vicki Lawrence. What? Yes, a Vicki Lawrence story. Oh, we got everything. Stan Zimmerman and I dive deep into Detroit. We grew up very close to one another, not the same time, but in the same location. So we got lots to talk about in terms of Southfield, Michigan, Detroit, Michigan, all the connections, all the stories coming at you right now. All right, everyone, I'm excited to introduce my next guest, producer, director, screenwriter. He's written for the Golden Girls, Roseanne, Fame, author of The Girls from Golden to Gilmore, stories about all the wonderful women I've worked with, Turnover, and Roseanne. Welcome to the show, Stan Zimmerman.
Thank you for having me.
Great to have you, Stan. I love reading your book. It was great. And I love when I'm reading a book and it talks about how you grew up in Southfield, Michigan. We grew up always saying we're one of the few Jewish families that never lived in Southfield. But I did grow up at Inkster and 11 Mile. So the other side of Inkster was Southfield. And I spent most of my days there because my cousins all lived in Southfield, Michigan.
As you should. So I was on 10 Mile. I went to John F. Kennedy Elementary School, Thompson Junior High, and Southfield High. My first job was the Americana Movie Theater, which I don't think is still in existence, but it was, first it was one big theater, and then they added on 2, 3, and 4.
Yeah, we used to have so many movie theaters. There was Old Orchard Movie Theater. There was
Town. Remember the Town Theater?
Yes, and the Maple, which was the classic place you'd go to see indies, gone.
Yeah.
And then
why?
I think the rent came up, and it was all of a sudden one day they're like, we're done, we're closed. I had just seen, the last movie I saw there was Barbie. So that was the last time I was there. And then the big one in Royal Oak that had been there forever, they tore down.
No, I'm so sad now.
But yeah, all of the classics are, as I grew up, I mean, it was like every weekend I would see movies, if it's all I did was go see movies.
Well, my father was very strict. Why? What was he trying to prove with that? Maybe he was afraid more I would get involved in the movie business. Well, we see how that worked out too, didn't we? But my mom actually ended up taking me to a lot of indie movies and introduced me to, I didn't know what an independent film was. And one of them we saw was Next Stop Greenwich Village, a Paul Mazursky film. And I saw that and I was like, I'm going to New York. I want to be Lenny Baker. That movie was all about a boy leaving Brooklyn to move into Manhattan and to be an actor. Starring the great Ellen Green from Little Shop of Horrors.
I love Ellen Green. I have an actual framed Little Shop of Horrors movie poster in my basement.
Basements. I miss basements. So in my basement in Southfield was where it all began. This is where the newspaper twirls around. But I would drag the other neighborhood kids into the basement and make them do plays with me. I mean, the basement to me was where I went to escape and we had imagination. Me, my brother, my sister would be down there playing and we each had a little section. I think probably one of the first computers, it was this huge thing. Now we have little computers. It was like something from Lost in Space or something. And then my sister had an area. And then my area I turned into actually a pseudo school. her how to handwrite before nursery school. She still complains because she holds the pencil wrong, still to this day. But I say, but you were writing. So I taught her how to write cursive. Then also down there, I created a puppet theater, which my brother and I would, for $5 do puppet shows for kids for their birthdays. And then I also did plays. And then I wanted to create, you remember the Ice Follies and Ice Capades?
Yes.
So I did not understand why there was not the Roller Follies. And I was intent on making that. The idea didn't go very far, but I still think it's a good idea.
It's still one of the classic ideas. It's just sitting there waiting for you to
waiting for someone else to steal. Do you know how many ideas I've said to my writing partner? I will like scream or send them screenshots of different movie and TV show ideas from the trades with like the Hollywood Reporter, Variety. That were ideas we talked about years ago. So we always say, we were so ahead of our time.
I feel the same way. I had an internet company in the late 90s, one of the first ones. And so we would write down stuff and I would call my partner and I'd be like, we basically invented monster.com.
Wow.
We had wrote down those ideas. We were like, how are we going to do this? It's like.
Did you know Allie Willis? Do you know who that is? She wrote September and Boogie Wonderland, a Detroiter. I met her out in LA. She wrote the theme song to Friends. She wrote the music to The Color Purple Broadway show. Just a few little songs. Anyway, she passed about, I think, 3-4 years ago. They made a documentary about her, which I'm in, wearing my J.L. Hudson's t-shirt. I found a t-shirt with the old J.L. Hudson's logo on it, and I wore it in my interviews for the documentary. And it's premiering in March at South by Southwest. But in her basement, I remember she called me over to her house, and she invented the internet. She was down there in the basement. She had this idea. And it's like everyone is connected through their computers. And I'm like, Allie, you've been smoking way too much pot. You've got to stop. She spoke to many like Mark Cuban and Bill Gates about this idea. She would speak to conferences about connecting us all on some machine. And here we are. Doing it. Yes.
It's funny you mentioned J.L. Hudson's. Such a classic location. I was downtown performing at a Forgotten Harvest comedy festival when they imploded it. And as a joke, Chuck Gatica, who was the host, walks in covered in dust,
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah, it was probably a bad day to have a huge event downtown. But
well, I loved the Thanksgiving Day parade we would go every year. I so wanted to be in the parade so bad. It didn't happen. There was a girl from my school, Cheryl Lowy, who got to be in the parade, and I'm still jealous and just furious with her. And I remember they had this for Christmas downtown. They had a children's shop, and you would go and you put all your money from your allowance, which was probably like, $15. And on the envelope, you would check off, you'd buy for your mother, your sister, your babysitter, your dog. And you had to figure out as a kid how to budget that $15 for, 8 people and get items. I thought that was such a smart idea to teach children, how to use your money wisely and pick out for yourself and use your imagination. My mother did something not like that. Remember those cereal packets?
The boxes you could cut open and pour the milk right into?
Yeah, exactly. You know what I'm talking about. So she would buy those from Kellogg's, and she thought that was great because it was a way for her 3 kids to create individual personalities. So it wasn't like, throwing down the box and say, you're eating this. You got to pick, well, what do you really like? Even at a young age, I knew that was a cool thing to do. Like I knew most mothers did not do that. So she really encouraged individuality and to, just follow your heart. And that's what I've been doing.
That's amazing. My experience was the opposite. My dad was a dentist, so no sugar cereals. And when I turned 16 and had a driver's license, I would go buy contraband like Fruit Loops and just hide it in my room.
You would just go over to Farrell's and just eat ice cream all day?
Yeah. Wear that hat,
Wear the hat, go get the zoo. That was, oh my God, I think about stomachache.
Good Chinese food on Christmas and we're all set. That's...
Yeah, but it was funny. In Detroit, I was such a picky eater. I didn't even eat Chinese food. I didn't even eat pizza. I just like peanut butter and jelly, tuna fish, and bologna. That was it. But we would go to Wing Hong on 10 Mile on Sundays, of course, and we would order fried chicken. I mean, the kids did.
Wing Hong was the greatest Chinese restaurant ever.
It's still there, and I did go eat there. I don't know if I would call it that, but it was fun to go back there.
All right. And then you went to New York and started doing all these famous things.
Well, I mean, I went to Cranbrook Theater School
Right.
for many years. I started at age 7 and was out in Bloomfield Hills in outdoor Greek theater, where I was accepted and I was lauded and praised for my creativity and being funny. Whereas in elementary school and junior high, I was bullied for it. So it was very hard as a kid to navigate that. Like, why? I'm the same person. Why do some kids really like me and other kids spit on me? That's a lot to figure out. And it wasn't until I went to Southfield High where it all kind of came together. I guess I came into myself more and got more confident.
High school was a little rough for me, and then college is when you could be yourself again. That I saw as well. But yeah, it's tough when you're not the cool jock or whatever the hell in the school. It's not the easiest. Everyone's like, "Oh, I loved high school." Did you? Because I didn't.
I did. The only thing I could connect it to was up to junior high, I had really frizzy hair in Detroit, with the humidity. By the time I got school bus and to school, it would be just a frizzy mess. And then I decided to let it go into a Jew-fro. And I thought, accepting me because I have curly hair? That's all I could pay. I was the same person, but I did look different. So I'm sure, that took up many hours of therapy as a young adult.
But eventually found your own. So, all right. So theater, you started with the love of theater, basement to Cranbrook.
Well, I was going to go to University of Michigan like my brother did and my parents and my aunts and uncles and everybody, pretty much my family went to U of M. So it was just like, that's where you're going. And I only applied to 2 schools. U of M was one of them. And then after spending summers at a summer theater camp in New Hampshire, I realized that if you were serious about acting, you had to go to New York or California. So there's a while I thought I'd UCLA, but New York, I got bitten by the theater bug and I was going to go to New York and auditioned and got in. And then my mom figured out a way to get me work study and able to afford it. I remember NYU started later, so all my friends from high school, I helped them move into U of M, Markley Hall. I felt so bad, like, did I make the right decision? And I should be with my friends. And then I go to New York and I was only 17. I was alone. I didn't know anybody. You soon find your friends and I'm still friends with them.
It's amazing the bond you make when go to college and especially if everyone's kind of all of a sudden on their own. There's a bit of a benefit to breaking away because I'm sure you're still friends with or talk to the people who went to U of M, but now you have a wider friendship circle but
really still friends with people I went to high school with. And we get together and we're like, we only knew each other for 3 years. But those 3 years were so intense. And also because the theater nerds that we were, we spent every second together. We would meet at the minute we got off the bus. And we came back to the theater and had our lunch together. And then we would classes, I guess. And then we came back to the theater to rehearse whatever play we were doing at the time. And then, go home, sleep, and start it all over again.
It is amazing how you can I have friends like that from just a summer that I spent. It was a B'nai B'rith summer camps back to back.
Wow.
And that was decades ago. And I just was in New York, met one of them for a drink. And that's all the time we spent together was just like those 6 weeks out of my entire life. And I can't even remember any other summer. Like that summer, there was something
magical.
Yeah. When you have something really interesting that happens and magical, it's like you're bonded forever.
I did go to Camp Tamarack for 2 summers.
I worked there.
Really? I didn't like it. But I went to Brighton, I think twice. Were you at Ortonville or Brighton?
I went to Ortonville one summer. I only went one summer, but as a staff, I worked at Brighton. I was like the arts and crafts guy. And then I went to Ortonville because there was a girl that went and I thought she was cute. So I switched too. Didn't work out, but.
You chased her to camp. And where is she today?
Yeah, I don't know. Probably.
And where is she today?
Sad and alone somewhere. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, she's just pining for you, probably.
Oh, it could have been.
Yes.
All right, so you're in New York and plays, and then you kind of stumble into writing, like you adapted something.
Not stumbled. I had in my bedroom in Southfield created my own TV network, so I was already in the mindset of I wanted to be involved in television. I didn't think I could ever be a writer. I kind of bragged to everybody that I didn't read books. people would come back from summer and they'd be like, I read 8 books, and they'd get little stamps on their library card or something. I was like, I read 0. Just didn't have any interest in books. And I wasn't good in English class because I felt that you had to kind of be fake and be very flowery and use lots of adjectives. And it just was like my writing was just cut to the chase. But I knew I had really cool ideas. I luckily met my writing partner, Jim Berg, who was a journalism major. So he kind of brought that craft to the partnership. And I brought the acting and as far as character work and emotional truth. It was a magical combination.
Magic. You guys met on Risky Business, the set of Risky Business?
No. We met just in the dorm, and we would make each other laugh. And then we went to see a movie, and we found out we had passion for ideas in writing and television, and we started writing a pilot, actually based on Next Stop Greenwich Village. And then we found out you had to write a spec script to break into TV. And so we started writing spec scripts in between school and our after-school jobs, landed an agent who only handled newscasters and for some reason took us on and sent our stuff out to LA. This was a year after college. I was working at a casting office in 1501 Broadway and Times Square. And our agent called and said, there's this man, Gary Keeper, who works at Paramount, who read your scripts and really likes it. And I told my boss, and he's like, all right, this is weird. He goes, Gary Keeper was one of my best friends in high school in Houston. What are the odds of that? Crazy, right?
Crazy.
Of all the people, crazy. But it was just a way of the world just going, you're meant to be here. And Gary just took us under his wing and was so helpful. And we came out to visit, and then I decided to move there because I was sick of being poor in New York. We went to a lot of free tapings of shows, and we kept writing. We wrote one script for a very new show that hadn't been on the air yet. It was very different than most sitcoms. It was about a bunch of weird people that hang out at a bar in Boston. Can't imagine what that show would be. That was just the script that everybody responded to. And suddenly we went from nobody calling us back to all these agents taking us out for lunch and drinks, and we became the flavor of the month. And that kind of started the ball rolling.
So with Cheers being a newer show, right? Mm-hmm. How do you prep for a spec script on a newer show? Because at the time, right, it's like VHS tapes. I mean, it's not like how do you kind of watch and get a feel for the variety of characters?
There's no computers with scripts, even samples of scripts. So when we started writing spec scripts, the first one we did was Alice. It was a show with Linda Lavin. We watched the show on TV. There was no pausing. There's no tapes or nothing. You had to watch the show as it was happening. And I sat there with a pen and a piece of paper. And there's a little scene, then there's a commercial. There's one scene, there's 2 scenes, there's another commercial. That's how we figured out story structure. I did that. I don't know. I'm very analytical and I like structure. So we looked at that and we said, okay, well, let's come up with the story and structure it just like their episodes. After watching a bunch of them, we saw a pattern and we just created that pattern. And it's having an ear. So like we noticed on Cheers, we didn't even read the script. We just saw. They would come in and they would just say like, hey, remember that? Mm-hmm. That was it. So that's what we did. We just kind of copied concept for the episode. Sam poses for Mr. February, like a sports, sexy and funny. And, Diane sees it by accident and all of that. And comedy ensues.
Funny. It's awesome. It's impressive. I mean, how much harder you had to work back then.
The kids have it so easy now. Yeah, they just throw it in AI and the script is done. We were our own AI back then. No, there's so many interesting new voices now, and there's so many more opportunities to have content. There's, not only the networks, what's left of them, but there's cable and streaming and your phone and YouTube. I mean, you could just go on and on and on.
Yeah, I know. It's impressive. I mean, because all the success you had was based on, you had to work really hard.
But that's the Midwestern upbringing.
Right.
I was taught, if you want to succeed, you have to work hard. There was just no question. We were going to work. When we were on staff, I would want to work weekend to write pilots or movies or other types of material.
At what point did you decide, because I know you auditioned for Fame. You were in Risky Business, though, right? You did have...
I did extra work. So I auditioned for the movie of Fame, very early in my college years. So somebody came to school one day and said, they're making a movie. They're looking for people that look under 20. And even though I was in college, I looked like I was 15. And all my friends, we all lined up, and it was, around the block and block and block and block. They got up to line, they looked at you, and they threw people out that looked too old. They kept me. My friends were all bye and leaving me there. And then they moved me to another group. And then all of a sudden they took a room by myself. And all of a sudden I was there with this British man with gray hair. And it was the director, Alan Parker.
Nice. I
didn't know till later. I was like, oh my God, this was the big time. And they had me read the part of Montgomery, the gay boy in the movie. Obviously I didn't get it. And I came home to Detroit and I worked as a dance and theater instructor at Cranbrook Theater School. Came back to New York early and had my first apartment in New York outside of the dorm. And it was across school where they were filming the movie Fame.
Oh, no.
So
the universe taunting you.
You don't get pardoned, but yet you have to hear that goddamn song. And they had to be dancing in the street in front of my window all summer. So that was lovely. But I got my revenge when Jim and I got an episode of the Fame syndicated series that we wrote. And that episode starred somebody you may have heard of named Janet Jackson. It was the first music video in that episode. It was directed by the great Debbie Allen. And we just lucked into that.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So that was the beginning of a lot of full circle moments. And I love that because it felt completed. It's done, check, move on.
Like, I loved you as Penny in Good Times.
Yeah. Oh, I remember seeing her in that. Yeah. And she's had quite the career.
Yeah. She's done good.
Yeah. She did good. Yes. And I take full credit for it. Yes.
Of course. Without that music video, who knows?
Never would happen. I always say that. So I also teach acting. And when I get these new actors in, I said, from this point on, any success you have, I'm going to take full credit. So when any of my actors, and I've taught a lot of them over the years, when they post about getting a job, I always type in, and you're welcome.
Well, you were with Risky Business and all that and stuff. Did you meet Tom Cruise?
Of course. I met him twice. So the first time he came into the office in New York, I was an assistant for a casting director. And he said, oh, this new actor is coming in. He just made his first film. And it was Taps. And in walks Tom Cruise with his head shaved from the movie. And he started bouncing up and down on our couch like he did on Oprah. I guess that's just the thing he does. And he was really, really sweet. And just, he was making a movie with all these young stars to be. I end up it was a big casting call for extras for it. I get called in. I go down to Larchmont, which doubled as Chicago. And all of a sudden they say, oh, yeah, you're going to be walking down the street with Tom Cruise. And so my heart's pounding. I go, I have to say something. And of course I said, oh, I don't know if you remember me. And he pretended like he did. So he's smart. And we had a really nice talk, about Taps. And here he was, now starring in his own movie.
All right. So that's cool. So you were friends with Tom way back.
Oh, yeah. We were really close friends. He never calls.
Never calls. He is kind of busy now. He's always making the Mission
He's not
Impossible
that busy. I actually, with another writing partner, we wrote our idea of what the sequel would be to Risky Business. It was called What the F. He's now divorced from Rebecca De Mornay. She takes the kids for a vacation and she says, will you watch our old house? And he watches the old house and decides with his buddies to throw a party with hookers.
Think you would have learned.
It's still a funny script. So Tom, if you're out there, hashtag Tom Cruise. I think it's time for a reboot of Risky Business. Little Tangerine Dream, come on.
I mean, it's the thing now, right? I mean, all the old movies and stuff getting sequels now.
Yeah, so. It's time to revisit. Yep. And he should do a comedy. I mean, he hasn't done comedies lately.
No, how funny was he in Tropic Thunder?
It depends. Wasn't that Ben Stiller?
That was Ben Stiller's movie, but Tom Cruise was like I think he played like a Jewish character.
Yes.
Like.
I'm looking right now. I can see Ben Stiller's old house. How's that?
Oh, that's nice.
How's that for the gay Kevin Bacon? Yeah, you name the star. Is Christine Taylor, who was Marcia in the Brady Bunch movies. They used to live around the corner from me, but now they sold that. They sold it to David Strathairn, and then Johnny Galecki bought it, and Johnny just moved out. There you go.
There you go.
Brady Bunch, yes.
I believe that the Brady Bunch movie, which I was excited to find out you wrote it, is one of the
Both
best.
of them.
Both of them. But the first Brady Bunch movie, though, in my heart, I think is one of the funniest movies and best TV adaptation type movies ever. Like that movie just kind of hit every button for me.
Yeah, it hit a lot of people in many different ways. A big part of it was for stoners. I'm assuming that was you. How dare you? You don't even know me and you're talking to me that way. Yeah, it allowed us to for me to lean into pop culture. I've been studying pop culture since a kid. And so we could play on all of that and still honor the Brady Bunch legacy and also introduce it to a whole new generation. So it was a super fun job. And I have to credit director Betty Thomas for just allowing us to just open our mind and be as creative and crazy as you want. We were only stuck with locations. She said, I've already known how we're shooting the movie, but within that location, you could change any word of dialogue you want. So we went crazy. We were crazy.
You were crazy. It's a bummer that you didn't get I know you got the writing credit for the sequel, Very Brady sequel, but it's a bummer to put that much, how the industry works, so you put that much into it and don't even get even anything, even like a little 10 point.
Anything. I mean, the money would be nice, but it's also for me acknowledgement that you worked on it. Those are your jokes. Those are your characters, and that just doesn't make sense to me. Just be fair. Find some word to say additional dialogue or rewrite by or something. I'm not going to go on strike right now. I'll start picketing in front of my house about that.
I will say, I think the funniest scene in that movie, which I think of all the time, I don't know why, but is the Davy Jones scene where the older moms start fawning. To me, that was all ours.
That was all from this crazy head.
Let me just say, I've never been happier to meet someone's crazy head before, because that honestly is anytime I think of that movie, that's where I focus. That to me was
really?
Well, it's just I thought that joke was beyond brilliant. It took the idea from the show, the older moms.
Twisted it. Yes.
And the older moms being the one that kind of fun, because Marsha's the one that's infatuated with them.
Right.
I don't know. I always thought that was the funniest thing ever. I love the whole thing, but that to me, that scene and that version of that song, great.
Yeah. I was really into the Monkey TV series growing up. And you love the Monkeys? I mean, I had never, as a kid, that and Batman were like, what the hell? And Bewitched. Those had this weird sensibility that wasn't normal. For those, we were just like, wow. I actually this is so embarrassing. I don't think I've ever said this. You know what a diorama is? Mm-hmm. It's in a box. Yeah. A diorama of the Monkeys playing. I made my parents mail it to them in California. Where or to who? I don't know how. I desperately wanted to tell Davy Jones on set that. And my writing partner was like, you cannot. And I had even their album, that first album, which I played to death. And I wanted to bring it in. And he's like, that's not cool. You cannot bring in your album and have him sign it. So that never happened. Thank you a lot, Jim Berg.
Jim put you on the wrong path there. You should be mad at him. And
yeah.
I saw the real live Brady Bunch.
So did we. Before the movie was even an idea. We had no idea that was going to be something. We saw it. It was so popular here. I'm trying to find how to do it as a revival, and I can't. There's nobody that has the rights to it. But Jim and I went to see it, and it was so huge. I think Jane Lynch played Mrs. Brady, Carol, and I think Mike was Annie Richter. It was think of those two. And it was so popular, we had to sit on the floor. There were not even chairs in the theater. And then a few years later, I was set to take a trip to Athens and Mykonos and Santorini. 2 days before, our agent called and said, I think I got your first movie writing gig, and it's the Brady Bunch movie. I'm like, oh, really? And then they sent the script over right away. You got to read it tonight. Stop everything packing. And I read the script and I was like, yeah. I like the idea of the Bradys in the past, being stuck in the past, but today.
Right.
But they didn't have many jokes about the Brady world. I felt it was a missed opportunity. So then nothing happened. I said that. And then I fly to Athens and I land, get to my hotel. The phone rings And I go, hello. And it's like a man on the other end, but it was actually Betty Thomas. She has such a low voice. Like, it's Betty Thomas. You want to get back here and write a movie for me? And if we want the gig, I said, give me 2 days in Mykonos and I'll be back. And I spent 2 days in Mykonos, came back, and it was for just a 2-week punch up, which means just rewrite the jokes. Just 2 weeks, that's it, you're done. Well, they loved what we did for 2 more, and then 2 more, and then this is deal making. But we did nicely by it, yeah.
That is amazing. I was saying with the Real Live Brady Bunch, we saw it at the Strand Theater in Pontiac, Michigan. And so I was dating my wife at the time. We had no money, so we would usher so we could see them all.
Oh.
There were 4 that they would do. Basically, for anyone listening, it was like they literally did the script, but a little very over the top. And the Davy Jones episode was one of them. And Davy Jones played Davy Jones.
No.
Yeah. Davy Jones was there.
He came in?
Yeah, he was there.
He came in.
My biggest regret to this day is like, I walked out, there was a line. I'm like, I wasn't as into like meeting people at that moment in my life as I would be now. And I hate myself for not going and meeting him. I've met Mike and I've met Mickey. They signed my Headquarters album. And,
Peter Tork?
I was going to a Comic-Con to meet Peter Tork, had my album. They had Stan Lee, the main guy, one of the main guys from The Walking Dead at the time. You couldn't get near the place. It took us 4 hours to try and get to the suburban hall.
Wow.
We bailed. Then he passed away. So I was like,
so close.
But yeah, I love the Monkees so much. All right. So then you wrote.
There's more?
Oh, yeah, you wrote episode 2 of Just Our Luck, The Shabelles.
The
Shabelles in 1983. This is just before we're going to get you onto the Golden Girls.
Oh, my God. We're only at the Golden Girls? People are like, let's do a drinking game at least.
Sorry to interrupt. I have to take a quick break. Want to thank everyone for their support of the sponsors. When you support the sponsors, you're supporting us here at Classic Conversations, and that's how we keep the lights on. And now back to my conversation with Stan Zimmerman. Let's talk Golden Girls. And we're back. Talk about the Golden Girls. I mean, that must have been amazing. Greatest shows of all time. I mean, you worked on 3 classic shows of all time: Roseanne, Gilmore Girls, and the Golden Girls.
Yeah, I mean, you're lucky if you get one hit. But these are not just hits. These shows are more popular today than they were back then, if that's possible. So it's many decades of just continued popularity. At the time, which you'll read in the book, unfortunately, there was just so much fear in going to work every day, of being fired, of not being good enough, not being funny. You couldn't make any misstep. I mean, these were 4 of the funniest women to ever have been on television, before, during, and after. Every line had to just be like top notch. So that's a lot of pressure for anybody, but a new writer. I'm really proud of the work we did on this show. I feel so fortunate when you're there in the beginning, especially on the season 1, you create a lot of things that continue on, with like Rose and the Long Stories, and B. Arthur just, giving her death stare, even naming St. Olaf. We were in the room when everybody came up with St. Olaf, that name. And also I feel very fortunate to have carved a really beautiful friendship with Estelle Getty, who played Sophia. Usually writers and actors on a show are kind of kept separately, or you're too busy writing to really get to know the actors. And I was really lucky that she took a shining to me, and I got to hang out with her and talk to her on the phone. I mean, how crazy is that?
That's really cool.
She'd be giving like me motherly advice. But that's who she was. She liked playing that mother figure. And she was also in LA by herself. Her husband lived in Florida, and at the time she said, we're very independent and he has his own life. I did not realize I wanted to, and still do want to, write a one-woman show about her. So I started talking to her kids and her old managers and other people in her life, and I found out that they had a very strange relationship, and that's why they were in separate cities. But here she was in LA, a superstar at that age, making tons of money. There were stories where, like, her managers had to say, Estelle, you have to do something with your money. You can't just like buy a house. You have to buy a car. And she's like, what's wrong with this old jalopy that I have? No, you've got to. And one time they made her buy a house, and she didn't really want the house. I always remember she lived not far from me now on the 3rd floor or 2nd floor of an apartment just on Hollywood Boulevard. And she invited me over for her birthday party. And I'm just sitting there on the couch in her little apartment. Like, you're a big star in a TV show. You should have a mansion. But no, she had like a little 2-bedroom apartment. And I'm just sitting there on the couch with her, and the door swings open, and in walks Betty White and Rue McClanahan together. They drove together to this apartment party. Like, okay, well, what happened? Who picked who up? I mean, did they have dinner before? I mean, it was just, and I would just sit there and pinch myself thinking, I feel so lucky to be sitting here and witnessing this up close.
I can't even imagine it. It sounds extremely cool. And then you only kind of connected with Susan Harris like one time you mentioned in the book until she yelled at you later.
One time at the wrap party. And she was so lovely to us. And, oh, you're doing great work. And, we're going to see you, enjoy your summer. We'll see you at the end of the summer. And then our option was not picked up. And that was really devastating. My writing partner was fine because he didn't feel we were treated very well on the show. But I loved writing those characters. I loved Estelle. I had a lot more I think we could have contributed to the show. But, those politics of any job. And it wasn't until a few years ago when we had another run-in with Susan Harris, when we got a lot of publicity for a show we were trying to sell called Silver Foxes, which was labeled in the press as the gay men's Golden Girls. And we did a kind of famous reading of it in my living room with the late Leslie Jordan and George Takei and Bruce Villain and Sherry O'Terry and some other great actors. I guess she had heard about it. And I think it was around the time of the death of her husband, Paul Witt, who's one of the producers. And I think what happened was that people came up to her at his memorial and said, oh, I hear you're doing a gay men's Golden Girls. And she's like, what? And somehow she got my number and my writing partner's number. My writing partner did not pick up the phone, and she left a long, very unpleasant, which is printed book. And I picked up the phone, not knowing who it would be. And all of a sudden, hi, it's Susan Harris. And she was pissed off. And she starts attacking me. And I didn't, this was all like during the Me Too thing. And I'm like, I didn't interrupt her. Wait, Susan, please, just listen to me. The entertainment business. I didn't make up that headline. Those people saying what the show was. I said every interview I've given, I have said it's not a reboot. I've screamed your praises of that you created that show. And she was just like, oh, okay. I just think, maybe she was in mourning, or I don't know what. Like, I can't get into her head. I felt terrible, and being attacked like that didn't feel good. But
on the flip side, oh my God, Susan Harris called me. Just kidding.
Yes. No, I wanted her to like me. I want people, I was like, can't we like have a drink and make up? I got her to calm down, but it was really hostile to me without knowing all the facts.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. I mean, the media does that all the time. All these clickbait headlines that make you think one thing, and the articles usually are even about something completely different. But it's just. Yeah. So there was the one thing about the book that I found really interesting and really liked was the thread. You've kept a journal throughout your life, and the journal entries that you put throughout the book to kind of color the story from your own words at that exact moment. So it's not necessarily a retelling, but like sometimes it's a little mix of both. I really like that. I really thought that was a cool way to kind of look into your head and know what you were really thinking, and then
on today, and like how I felt as a young person being thrown into these extraordinary circumstances and working with extraordinary people. And then today, being older, wiser, we're not so sure, but I think maybe a little bit. Yeah, I like the juxtaposition. It was funny because in college, my modern dance teacher made us start journaling. And I'm like grumbling, I don't want to do that. Thank you, Willa Khan, for getting me in the habit of journaling, and I'm still journaling. And it's very therapeutic. I always like to look back a year ago at the time, like where was I? And I love doing a year-end kind of capsule of what my year was and my favorite movies or plays, or my least favorite, December 31st. And of course, a few years ago, I was busy doing it, and all of a sudden, my phone just like was buzzing. Was the passing of Betty White, who everybody was hoping would make it to 100 a few weeks later, and she didn't. So that New Year's Eve changed drastically all my plans, thrown out the window, and I ended up doing a bunch of live interviews and talking about her. I think because I wanted people to really celebrate all the laughs that she brought us for so many years on so many different TV shows and movies.
Yeah, that was the biggest bummer ever when Betty White died. I mean, because I think like everyone would be, anytime someone else would die, the common thing on Twitter or whatever would be like, somebody grab the bubble wrap and wrap it around Betty White.
I mean, we thought she would live forever, but nobody can live forever.
It's amazing how much she lived during the time she lived. I mean, it was just like, it's an inspiration just that someone can max out their years as well as Betty White did, and the joy that she just brought while doing so.
So many generations just loved her. And she was really at the beginning of television, of the television industry. I mean, some people joke they turned on television for the first time and there was Betty White.
It's true. I was watching a Dean Martin roast and they were making fun of her for being 50.
My God, she's over the hill. Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it was just like, wow, that was 50 years ago.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, those Dean Martin roasts. We had to go to the Roseanne roast when we were on Roseanne, and they made us buy tickets to the table. I mean, isn't bad enough. But they kept saying, well, it's a day off from work. But no, like that was our day off. It was the Friars roast down, not televised. This was live in Beverly Hills, like the old timers.
Oh, wow. I know you probably got limited on time here, but so the Roseanne experience wasn't great. But the one thing that came out of it was meeting Amy Sherman, who you later had a good experience with on the Gilmore Girls. So with Rose Abdoo, also Michigan's own Rose Abdoo.
Yes, how crazy is that? And Bill Brady, who I went to elementary school with and talked him into going to Cranbrook Theater School. And he also co-created Big Bang Theory, but we ended up on staff at the same time. 3 people from Southfield. What are the odds of that?
I know you don't usually see Southfield as being pinned as a entertainment mecca.
It is the it is the epicenter of everything. Yes,
right. Because you've hung out with Sandra Bernhardt, Madonna, all Michigan folks.
Oh, Allie Willis. Yeah, there's a Lily Tomlin.
Yeah. Michigan's a very underrated. People don't think about Michigan, but if you Google stars from Michigan, there's quite a list that starts rolling down your screen. So
it's a lot of creative people there, and normally, these people get out quickly. It wasn't until I was a young adult I went back for a visit, and I finally went to the Motown Museum.
Oh, that's great. That's a great place.
Oh my God. I could feel it in the walls. You just felt there were ghosts, and there was just this vibe in that room. It was just eerie. It was pretty cool.
That is really cool. Oh, so one random thing I read in your book. You talked about Vicki Lawrence explaining the lights went out in Georgia.
Yeah, so that was on Roseanne. So if people remember the end of Roseanne, there was all these really funny, what we called tags, like a little minute or 2-minute piece at the end of the show that they would normally cut off in syndication, but to make more money with commercials. Well, that week, Roseanne and Tom got into this huge argument after the table read on Monday behind the set, and then we heard a door slam, and then Tom came out and said, Roseanne, this is what I remember, that she will not be in the show this week, and you have to write her out of the episode. They're like, well, what are we going to do? The show is called Roseanne. We were told every scene, even if she's not in it, Roseanne has to drive the story. So we went back to our offices going, what the hell just happened? And we came up with this idea. We remembered that Dan had talked about some girlfriend that Roseanne was jealous of from high school. So we brought that character to life and we cast Vicki Lawrence. So then it came time to, all right, we got to come up with a funny tag. Me and Jim and a bunch of writers like Norm Macdonald or Kyle Linger, we all went to a room, pitched ideas. And loved that song. I actually have the 45, I still have it, of Vicki Lawrence's song, The Night the Lights Went Out in Georgia. I loved the Carol Burnett show when I could stay up. I was young and I would fall asleep probably by 10:20. I said, we have to explain that song because it makes no sense. She loved the idea. So it's Vicki Lawrence with the chalkboard explaining what the lyrics mean, and they don't mean anything. Anyway, so that was fun to do crazy stuff like that.
Well, the funny thing, I love that song. Like I only hear it randomly on Sirius XM every now and then. I will never turn it. And actually, a few weeks ago, it was on. I was listening to it. My wife turns it, and I snapped Like in a
Oh my
funny-
God.
I'm like, what'd you just do? She's like, that it's the
It's that
worst song.
song.
That's the worst song ever. I'm like, that's Vicki
No,
Lawrence. No,
yes.
you gotta listen to it. It's the beauty. It's in the craziness that it exists.
At all. That there was this woman from a variety show had a record. It was a hit record. Like that's pretty random. Yeah.
All right, so you wrote the Lesbian Kiss episode, so that's a very famous episode.
Yes.
Very cool. And then Gilmore Girls, and you write plays now. I know
And then-
we're at the end of it.
Yeah. They were done. Yes.
Yeah, but I just everyone can read the book too. We don't want to tell everything.
Yeah, come on. Like, let them do a little work here.
Yeah, a little work.
And
so.
it reads, I really wanted the book to feel like we were just hanging out having coffee or, a drink or something. And it's just very conversational. And yeah, because I've never written a book before. This was something very new. And I'm really glad I did it after talking about it for over 8 years.
Well, the Stan Zimmerman story is very enjoyable, and I loved it. And it's like you've done so much, and like I don't know, it's just I read a lot of these books, and so I thought it was great. Boom, 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 boom. Yeah, I mean you have so much. There's no filler. It's just like it's all just great stories, and then on to the next great story. We got they didn't like us here, so we went here. We didn't do this, so we did that. And it's like,
well, it's also a lesson in which I saw looking back at it, how you pick yourself up from adversities. And people may think it's very glamorous, which it is, but also it's a lot of uncertainty and no security in your job. And how do you pick yourself up? How do you reinvent yourself? How do you keep going? How do you, in a business that always are people telling you no, how do you not take that personally and think that you're just the worst writer ever? And, then losing very close people in your life. And so it does deal with grief and how I processed and am still processing all of that.
Yeah, that your story about your mom, you kind of touched home with me in terms of, the losses that I've had as well. So it was very an endearing chapter and way to end the story with all that she had done.
I was not planning it to end that way. I would rather have had the book come out and gotten to give my mom a copy of it, but that's not how the story went, unfortunately.
It's amazing how she inspired and supported you throughout, and it was
and still does, and I still talk to her probably more now than ever. So she's probably watching this and saying, like, come on, enough already with him.
Well, it was an amazing tribute to her, the way you ended the story from where your story ends now, because I know you're just getting going. You'll do many more.
Just getting going, but I would not be here if it wasn't for her and her tenacity and her belief in me against a lot of odds. That means a lot to a child, and she would always brag, like, how many parents, allow their son to get ballet slippers and go to theater camp. She knew that was really unusual, and I think she found great pride in that. She saw something in me that she wanted to nurture, and I can never repay or thank her enough.
That's a mother's job, and it sounds like she nailed it.
She did nail it, so thank you for acknowledging that.
Stan, this has been a pleasure. Thank you very much for hanging with me and sharing your stories. It's always good to talk to another Michigan alum.
Cool. Thank you.
All right. How amazing is Stan Zimmerman? So many great stories. He has done so much. Definitely check out his book, The Girls from Golden to Gilmore, stories about all the wonderful women I've worked with, and Roseanne. It's a really fun read. Definitely check that out. Link in my show notes for you. Well, with the interview over, can only mean one thing. I know. I can't believe it either. The interview has come to an end. Another huge thank you to Stan Zimmerman for hanging out with me. And of course, a huge thank you to all of you for coming back week after week. It means the world to me. And I'll see you next time.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of Classic Conversations. If you like what you heard, don't be shy and give us a follow on your favorite podcast app. Also, why not go ahead and tell all your friends about the show? You strike us as the kind of person that people listen to. Thanks in advance for spreading the word, and we'll catch you next time on Classic Conversations.